This check used to hang on the wall of my father's home office. It was a reminder of one of his businesses, one of his business ventures, I should say, the Mobsters. The Mobsters was a custodial company with the motto, as printed on the check, mediocre work, outrageous prices. I mean, that was, talk about trouble is trying to cash a check with that motto on it. In the days when every time you cash a check, you were having to deal with a teller. And if you happened to be a young person with a check that came from a company that said mediocre work, outrageous prices, that could at times be an issue. And I can tell you that on more than one occasion, because I worked for the Mobsters, that I had trouble cashing checks at times, but it was reflective of my father's sense of humor, as well as his heart to serve. You see, he formed the Mobsters when the First Covenant Church in San Jose, California needed a new custodian. And he came up with this great idea. They were having trouble finding someone that would take the job, but he was on the church board, and he came up with this idea to form a company that could contract with the church and then hire all or any of the high school students in the youth group who wanted a job. And he would supervise them, and they would get paid way over minimum wage to do the work. It was, by the way, one of the best jobs that I ever had, and lots of kids worked for us, including a couple of developmentally disabled guys. And my father did all the paperwork or book work, and he also never paid himself. So the company made this great profit, which resulted in nice bonuses for all of the workers, as well as these periodic and regular parties at the Farrell's Ice Cream Parlor. Now, the Mobsters were not my father's only venture. He started the breakfast club at our church as well. Every Sunday, I drove the church van around the neighborhood and picked up kids before Sunday school. And my parents, my mother and my father, were in the church kitchen, and they were making pancakes. And then we got them all in there, and we sat them around tables, and they were served this wonderful fresh breakfast and orange juice and pancakes, and I think there was bacon, and it was great. It was a great outreach for the church. And at one point we had over 30 mostly low-income kids from the neighborhood who were coming to breakfast on Sunday mornings and then going to Sunday school. My father also started the Covenant Child Care Center at the now defunct Squaw Peak Covenant Church in Phoenix. And he remained on the Child Care Center board even after the church folded. And the church ceased to exist, but the Child Care Center, 30 plus years later, continues to exist. And these days, at my father's initiative, the Child Care Center belongs to Masterpiece Church. We control the board, and we benefit from being associated or having them under our umbrella. The Child Care Center even bought this house. They purchased this house and this property, and we have it mortgage-free. And they're helping us to establish a Laveen Children's Center that we are calling Masterpiece Farm. Then, another story. When I was a boy, we had other children living with us in our family. It was an informal fostering of kids who needed a place for a while. And I'm actually still in touch with one of them, Karina Jensen. She and her brother Alan lived for us a while before I was in kindergarten. And Karina, who is my age, is a nurse in Stockholm, which is in her native Sweden, and how she got to the United States is a long and complicated situation. And then she would periodically come back for visits and such, and she tells me that that I led her to faith in the Lord on one of her return visits to the U.S. when we were both in our 20s. But I didn't realize that happened until years later when she told me that. And I credit my parents' hospitality years way even earlier than that with that opportunity. My parents were also early adopters of international child sponsorship. All the years that I was growing up, our family sponsored Kyung-soo. He was a kid about our age who lived in post-war Korea, South Korea. He was a World Vision orphan. He lived in one of their orphanages. And a couple of times the choir in which he sang came to California, and he got to stay overnight at our house. That was big stuff. I remember in detail all the things that went on when his choir came in, when he came and stayed at our house. Cheryl and I are still sponsoring World Vision Kids, one in Chile and one through the Covenant Kids Congo, which is a Covenant Church World Vision collaborative operation. And in my mind, all of that can be traced back to the benevolent influence of my parents. And did I mention that Hope Covenant Church in Chandler started in my parents' living room? Yes, they were the quiet, soft-spoken, persistent driving force behind that as well. And these are just a few of the things, and I'm sure that there were a whole lot more of which I'm unaware. My father was fairly quiet about all that he was doing, and it's been just over a year since my father died, and I miss him a lot. And I'm just now really beginning to realize how much of an imprint that he left on my life, on my values, on my vision, on my faith, the way that I carry those things out. And I was again reminded of him and what he modeled when I was working with our passage in 3 John this week. And I was thinking how we should continue to imitate him. As John says in verse 11, "Dear friends, don't imitate what is bad, but what is good. Whoever practices what is good belongs to God. Whoever practices what is bad has not seen God." Practically speaking, discipleship is about imitating this kind of godly goodness that we see in others who are following Jesus. Jesus' people. Yes, being able to articulate that is very important, but faith and discipleship are more often caught than taught. And I know I've shared my definition of leadership more than once. Leadership is 90% modeling what you want to see happen. It's 5% explaining to whoever will listen to you what it's all about. And it's 4% holding the hands of others as they try it out for themselves. And it's 1% filling out any paperwork that gets generated in the process. A lot of what we do is tipped toward modeling. Listen to the entire New Testament book of 3 John as I read it to you again, this time in the authorized Boydston paraphrase. "Greetings from John the elder to my dear friend Gaius, whom I love in the truth. Dear friend, I pray that you would prosper with both physical and spiritual health. I was elated when some Christian brothers and sisters arrived with news about you. They were raving about how faithfully you live out the truth. Nothing, absolutely nothing, makes my day like hearing how my children get truth and make it the basis of their lives. Dear friend, the Christian brothers and sisters who showed up on your doorstep were total strangers to you. Yet you displayed true faithfulness in the way that you welcomed them. It is no wonder that they speak so highly of you during the sharing time at our church gatherings. Keep it up. Help out the missionaries as they travel about with the message of Jesus. The non-Christians are certainly not paying their way, and your care really honors God. It makes sense that we help out people like this. When we do so, we become co-workers partnering with the truth. I actually wrote something to the church about all this, but in contrast to you, Diotrephes, who likes to put himself first, is making us feel unwelcome. If we do end up coming, I will spell out all the ways that he is mistreating us, making false and might we even say wicked accusations against us. And if that were not bad enough, in addition to his refusal to extend Christian hospitality to the brothers and sisters, he also throws up roadblocks in front of those who are trying to do the right thing. He has even tossed people out of the fellowship of the church. So, dear friend, take the high road. Don't follow Diotrephes. Don't use him as a model. Instead of mimicking bad behavior, imitate what is good. It is clear that those who practice good belong to God. Those who act bad, regardless of what they say, are totally clueless about God. On the other hand, everyone speaks quite highly of Demetrius. Even the truth itself recognizes him as a co-worker. He has our recommendation, and you know that we are speaking the truth. I have plenty more to say to you, but I prefer to not put it in writing. I expect that I'll be seeing you soon enough, then we can have a good face-to-face chat. Be blessed with peace. Your friends here send greetings your way. Likewise, greet each and every one of our friends there. John, the elder, is working hard to encourage his dear friend Gaius, and he's trying to get Gaius to see that Jesus' people follow those who model the truth. That is the key point this morning. Jesus' people follow those who model the truth. These are the Jesus people who, first of all, are putting themselves last. And that's number one on the message guide. They are putting themselves last. In verse 9, John is saying that one of the reasons we should not imitate Diotrephes is that he likes to put himself first. He likes to put himself first. We were all taught, and I'm sure you were taught this as well when you were growing up, that we should always let others go first. But what John is attacking here is an attitude that goes deeper than impoliteness. There are people who make life decisions based on what is best for themselves. That is their primary consideration. But Jesus says that if you want to be a success in God's eyes, when you consider yourself, it will be after you consider the needs of others. This is what leads to greatness. This is true of ourselves as individuals, and it is as true for a society in the overall world community. Now, there are certain people who believe that the most effective way to run a society is to turn everyone loose to be self-centered, and the competition that results from that will end up resulting in better overall success for everybody. And there are certain people who say that America first needs to be the decisive criteria for national policy. Well, when we're talking this way, either as individuals or as a nation, we are simply pulling slogans out of the Antichrist handbook. And we are lining ourselves up with the devil's agenda rather than the agenda of Jesus. When James and John were younger, way younger before John wrote this letter, they were jockeying for positions among the disciples themselves. And Jesus used their jockeying as an opportunity to teach about status and power. And we see that in Mark 10, 42 to 44. Mark 10, 42 to 44, if you would jot that down. But Jesus called the disciples together and said, you know that those foreigners who call themselves kings like to order their people around. And their great leaders have full power over the people they rule. But don't act like them. If you want to be great, you must be the servant of all the others. And if you want to be first, you must be everyone's slave. The Son of Man did not come to be a slave master, but a slave who will give his life to rescue many people. Diotrephes, in his bid to micro-control the church, was acting like one of these foreign despots rather than like Jesus. And he wanted to decide who could be heard and who couldn't be heard. He worked hard to make life miserable or impossible for those whom he disliked. He was a control freak who preached my way or the highway. And as his kindergarten teacher wrote on his evaluation, he did not play well with others. And John, the respected elder, says, it should be a no-brainer, but he says, don't imitate people like this. Don't use the me-first people as models for your own life. Don't accept them as your leaders. I mean, it is tempting. Me-first people often have more external successes than those who assume a quieter servant role. They assert themselves strongly and they get things done. They may be all the wrong things, but at least they can point to this long list of accomplishments, of successes. The me-first people sometimes have these long lists of real or imagined accomplishments that woo us into thinking that they are important people who are worth emulating. But John says, don't fall for that bag of wool. Rather, imitate those who have given themselves to a life of godly good. Imitate those who take on and take in stray children. Imitate those who start companies to provide jobs for a bunch of high school students who need work experience. Imitate those who quietly go about influencing the world toward Jesus without trying to be a big shot in the process. Jesus' people follow those who model the truth. These are the Jesus people who are putting themselves last, and then secondly, who are speaking and living the truth. Or speaking and living truth. Speaking and living truth. This idea is a bit of a rehash of what John has already said in 1 John and as well as 2 John. Truth spoken and lived matters. This is in contrast to the posers who are presenting alternative facts, facts with no basis in reality or revelation, living alternative truth which didn't really take into account the well-being of others or the fellowship of the church. Verses 9 and 10 again. I actually wrote something to the church about all this, but in contrast, you, Diotrephes, who likes to put himself first, is making us feel unwelcome. If we do end up coming, I will spell out all the ways that he is mistreating us, making false and might we even say wicked accusations against us. That is, he was misstating the truth and spinning his opinion as fact. And if that were not bad enough, in addition to his refusal to extend Christian hospitality to the brothers and sisters, he is also throwing up roadblocks in front of those who are trying to do the right thing. He has even tossed people out of the fellowship of the church. He's not only talking wrong, but he is acting wrong. He's unraveling the fellowship of the church, and the fellowship of the church is our fellowship with Christ. He is destroying relationships and making life hard for people. Don't give these guys who run footloose and fancy-free with the truth the time of day. Don't hook up with them. Don't imitate such blowhards. They are working with the enemy. Rather, join the resistance by living the co-worker life. This is number 3 on the message guide, living the co-worker life. The Jesus people follow those who model the truth. These are the Jesus people who are 1, putting themselves last, 2, speaking and living truth, and 3, living the co-worker life. In verse 12, John points to another man, a man named Demetrius. In contrast to Diotrephes, Demetrius welcomes these genuine traveling missionaries, the Christian workers, and through his openness and hospitality, he himself has become a co-worker with the truth. Verse 12, on the other hand, everyone speaks quite highly of Demetrius. Even the truth itself recognizes him as a co-worker. He has our recommendation, and you know that we are speaking the truth. This is a guy who has a heart for mission and is living the mission life, supporting those who are reaching the unreached, even though he will not personally benefit or know any of these people that are being reached, nor will he personally gain from hosting traveling missionaries. When the mission of Christ defines how we live our lives, how we spend our money, how we spend our time, how we welcome missionaries into our lives, pray for them, help them to get to where they need to go in order to serve out on the gospel frontiers. When we do that, we become these co-workers in the spread of the good news of Jesus, the truth. There are some people who never figure this out. They only see what is happening right now, right in front of them. And for them, that is all that matters. They do not see the bigger picture. And John is saying, when you choose models for your life, choose someone who has this kind of bigger picture thinking and who has actually incorporated it into his or her life. Choose models who are Jesus people, people who are about Jesus, people who are putting themselves last, people who are speaking and living truth, people who are living the co-worker life. Now that's one side of John's message here. Perhaps it's the main thrust. And I've certainly had many such people in my life, including my father, who was such a strong influence, as fathers often are. But who are the people who have modeled these Jesus priorities for you? Maybe anybody want to mention a name? Who are the people that have modeled Jesus priorities for you?
Terry.
Okay. Who else?
All the teachers in Chicago.
Okay, some teachers. Who else? A pastor. There's an additional implication to John's message here in 3 John, although he does not come right out and state it. That is, we also ought to be using these standards for ourselves so that we become such models. That makes sense, right? If you have a model that is at these standards, you are going to become the same kind of a person. Imitate these healthy patterns so that others can eventually imitate you. Now, perhaps you're thinking, well, hey, I'm a long, long way from being that kind of a person. Well, the point is, don't give up too quickly, even if you're struggling to be that kind of a person. In God's economy, no experience and no mistake that you made is ever wasted. And sometimes it is the way that we go about working through our weaknesses, working through our issues, that becomes what others latch onto and start to imitate. The very fact that you are hanging in there as you struggle makes you a great model of God's grace. sometimes you don't even realize that you're such a model until well after the fact. You see, God has this thing about applying His grace and mercy to broken and struggling people. It's a great thing to model grace. And that is the good news. So, who would like to share an insight perhaps about the passage or something that jumps out at you? Maybe something completely different than what I focused on. Or who would like to ask a question about the passage or tell a story of how you see God at work in your own life?
I think one thing, Michael, you focus in who we imitate. Now I think it's the other ways, who you want to become, the people you imitate you. So as a leader, anybody like a teacher in the school, the parents in the house, and the leader in the company, we have to think about what we have to do, what we have to live in our life, and so the people can follow us and imitate us.
Yes, and one of the dangers of using teachers as models is that we tend to think that getting people to imitate us becomes a matter of laying out a curriculum and having a kind of a teaching context for it. But in reality, it's more a matter of them of capturing their imaginations for the kind of person that you are, and that's really what's going to do the job. Even though it's important to be able to explain those things down the road at some point, but it's am I a model kind of person? And is my life capturing the imagination of people that are going to be influenced by it?
Yes, this is why the next generation, as when I'm child, I like to want to become my mother, my teacher, then I think all the children think about this one. Can learn anything from the parents, their parents and their teachers. So this is what I put my point is, as in here all is the mother and father and the teachers in our church, many people is in these roles. Then we have to think about what we have to do. And then, because we have a big impact in our children.
Yeah. Yeah. Someone else?
If you're talking about a teacher modeling for children, you can't find a better one than Donna. Kind and patient and creative and loving.
Yeah,
and she cares about not just the moment, but the future for each child.
And it's her ability to do the curriculum kinds of things creatively, but that really just becomes a context for communicating herself, who she is as a person. And that's what is going to come through and make the most lasting of impressions.